It was a hot Saturday afternoon in the summer of 1998 when everything changed for 12-year-old Daniel and his mother, Rebecca. They were doing their weekly grocery shopping at Patterson's Market, the only big grocery store in their small town. Rebecca pushed the cart slowly through the aisles, carefully checking prices and comparing brands. Money was tight, as it always was. She worked long hours as a nurse at the county hospital, and on weekends she cleaned houses to make ends meet. Daniel walked beside her, helping her pick items from the lower shelves. He was a quiet kid, the kind who noticed everything but didn't say much. He watched his mother calculate prices in her head, saw her put back the more expensive cereal and choose the store brand instead. He never complained. He understood, even at 12, that his mom was doing her best. They had almost finished shopping when Rebecca remembered she needed to grab one more thing from the front of the store. She left the cart in the aisle and walked toward the entrance, with Daniel following close behind. She picked up a small bottle of aspirin from the display near the checkout counters. Her head had been hurting all morning from her overnight shift at the hospital. As they walked back toward their cart, something happened that would haunt them for the next 20 years. The security alarm at the exit suddenly went off, loud and piercing. Everyone in the store turned to look. Rebecca froze, confusion washing over her face. She wasn't even near the exit. She was still in the middle of the store, but that didn't matter to the store manager, Mr. Patterson. He came rushing over, his face red and angry. He was a big man, the kind whose presence filled a room. He had owned this store for 30 years and knew almost everyone in town. Or at least he thought he did. "Ma'am, I need you to stop right there," he said loudly. His voice carried across the entire store. Other shoppers stopped what they were doing and stared. Rebecca looked around, genuinely confused. "I'm sorry, is something wrong?" The alarm went off. "I need to check your bags," Mr. Patterson said, crossing his arms. "But I haven't even paid yet," Rebecca said, gesturing toward her full cart that was still in the next aisle. "I was just getting aspirin." Daniel stood next to his mother, his heart pounding. He could feel everyone's eyes on them. The whispers started almost immediately. He saw Mrs. Chen from down the street covering her mouth as she spoke to another woman. He saw Tommy Richardson's dad shaking his head. "I don't care what you say." The alarm went off. "That means someone's trying to steal something," Mr. Patterson said. His voice got even louder. "I've been in this business long enough to know a shoplifter when I see one." Rebecca's face went pale. "Sir, I promise you I haven't taken anything." "Please, you can check. You can search my purse, anything. There's been a mistake." "Yeah, the mistake was you thinking you could steal from my store," Mr. Patterson said. Several people had gathered now, forming a small crowd. Some had their phones out. This was before smartphones, but people had cameras. Daniel saw flashes going off. His mother's hands were shaking as she opened her purse, showing Mr. Patterson everything inside. Her wallet, her car keys, a pack of tissues, her hospital ID badge. Nothing from the store. Nothing with a security tag. "What about your pockets?" Mr. Patterson demanded. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, but she turned her pockets inside out. They were empty except for a crumpled receipt from the gas station. Daniel wanted to say something, anything, but his throat felt tight. He was just a kid. Who would listen to him? But he watched his mother being humiliated in front of the whole town, and something inside him broke. "My mom didn't steal anything," he said, his voice cracking but clear. "She's a nurse. She helps people. She wouldn't do this." Mr. Patterson barely glanced at him. "Son, stay out of this. This is adult business." "But the alarm must be broken," Daniel insisted. "We weren't even near the door." "I said stay out of it," Mr. Patterson snapped. Then he turned back to Rebecca. "You know what? I don't care what I can or can't find on you. The alarm went off, and you're the only one who was near that area. I want you out of my store, and don't come back. You're not welcome here anymore." Rebecca's face crumbled. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she didn't even try to wipe them away. "Please," she whispered. "Please, I didn't do anything. Check the cameras, please." "The cameras aren't working right now. We're having them fixed," Mr. Patterson lied. He just wanted her gone. He wanted this scene over. "Now get out before I call the police." The crowd parted as Rebecca walked toward the exit, her head down. Daniel grabbed her hand and walked beside her, his own face hot with shame and anger. He could hear the whispers following them out. I always knew there was something off about her. Single mother, working all those jobs. You never know. Poor kid having a mother like that. They got to their old car in the parking lot, and that's when Rebecca finally broke down. She sat in the driver's seat, her hands covering her face, and sobbed. Deep, painful sobs that shook her whole body. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, not knowing what to do. He had never seen his mother cry like this. "Mom," he said quietly. "Mom, it's okay. I know you didn't do anything." She looked at him, her eyes red and puffy. "I know, baby, I know. But they don't believe me. No one in there believed me." Daniel felt something hard and determined settle in his chest. "I'll prove it," he said. "I don't know how, but someday I'll prove you didn't do anything wrong." Rebecca pulled him into a hug, holding him tight. "You're such a good boy," she whispered. "Don't you ever forget that none of this is your fault. And don't you carry hate in your heart. Promise me." But Daniel couldn't promise that, not yet. All he could think about was Mr. Patterson's face, the way everyone had looked at his mother, and the sound of her crying in this parking lot. He made himself a different promise that day. He promised himself that he would make this right, no matter how long it took. The news spread through their small town like wildfire. By Monday morning, it seemed like everyone had heard about what happened at Patterson's Market. Daniel walked to school that day expecting things to be normal, but he quickly realized how wrong he was. In his homeroom class, kids who usually said hello to him looked away. Jenny Martinez, who sat next to him in math, asked the teacher if she could move to a different seat. When Daniel asked her why, she just shrugged and said her mom told her to. That hurt more than if she had just been mean to him directly. At lunch, he sat at his usual table, but one by one, the other kids found reasons to leave. "I forgot something in my locker. I need to talk to my teacher. I'm not really hungry anymore." Within 5 minutes, Daniel sat alone at a table meant for 8 people. He stared down at his sandwich, his appetite completely gone. It got worse as the days went by. Someone wrote "Thief's Kid" on his locker in permanent marker. The principal made them clean it off, but everyone had already seen it. During gym class, no one would pick him for their team. He was always chosen last, and even then his teammates acted like he wasn't there. But Daniel could handle what was happening to him. What he couldn't handle was what was happening to his mother. Rebecca lost 3 of her house cleaning clients within 2 weeks. Mrs. Walsh called and said she was going in a different direction. The Johnsons simply stopped answering her calls. The Petersons were the worst. They left an envelope with her final payment on their doorstep with a note that said, "We can't have someone we don't trust in our home." Rebecca tried to hide how much it hurt, but Daniel knew. He knew because he heard her on the phone late at night, calling other families in town asking if they needed cleaning services. The answer was always no. He knew because he saw how thin she was getting, how she would give him bigger portions at dinner and claim she wasn't hungry. He knew because he found her crying in the bathroom one night, though she quickly wiped her tears and pretended she had something in her eye. Even at the hospital where she worked, things changed. Most of her co-workers were kind, but some weren't. Nurse Bradley stopped inviting her to the break room. Dr. Stevens, who used to joke with her during night shifts, became cold and professional. Rebecca overheard 2 other nurses talking in the supply closet once, not knowing she was on the other side of the door. "I heard she got caught red-handed at Patterson's. I always thought she seemed too good to be true. Single mother, always so sweet. Usually hiding something. Makes you wonder what else she's been doing." Rebecca stood frozen on the other side of that door, her hand on the handle, unable to move. When she finally walked away, she felt like a part of her had died. The worst part was how the town treated them like they were invisible. People who used to wave hello would cross the street to avoid them. At the post office, at the bank, at the gas station, conversations would stop when they walked in. Rebecca and Daniel became ghosts in their own town, living among people who acted like they didn't exist. Daniel started getting into fights at school. When Billy Cooper called his mother a criminal during recess, Daniel punched him. When a group of 8th graders started making jokes about them in the hallway, Daniel shoved the biggest one into a locker. Each time he ended up in the principal's office. Each time his mother had to leave work early to pick him up. "Baby, you can't keep doing this," Rebecca told him after the 3rd fight. They were sitting in their car outside the school and she looked exhausted. "I know it's hard. I know what they're saying hurts, but fighting won't fix anything." "They're liars," Daniel said, his voice tight with anger. "All of them. And no one will listen." "I know," Rebecca said softly. But you listening to them, letting them make you angry, that's letting them win. We have to be stronger than that. How? Daniel asked, and his voice broke. How are we supposed to be strong when everyone thinks you're a criminal? When they treat us like we're garbage? Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. Then she took his hand. We keep going. We keep living our lives with honesty and dignity. We don't become bitter, because bitterness will poison us from the inside. We don't become cruel, because then we're no better than them. We just keep being who we are, and someday the truth will matter again. Daniel wanted to believe her, but it was hard. It was hard when his teachers started grading him more harshly. When the school counselor kept calling him in for check-ins like he was a problem child. When his best friend since kindergarten, Tyler, stopped returning his calls because Tyler's parents didn't want them hanging out anymore. The isolation weighed on both of them. Rebecca stopped going to church because the stares and whispers were too much. They stopped going to the town's summer festivals and community events. They created a small world that consisted of just the two of them, their apartment and the places they absolutely had to go. Money became tighter than ever. With fewer cleaning jobs, Rebecca was surviving on just her nursing salary. She picked up extra shifts whenever she could, which meant Daniel spent more time alone. He learned to make dinner for himself, to do his own laundry, to handle things most 12-year-olds shouldn't have to handle. But through it all, they had each other. Every night, no matter how tired she was, Rebecca would sit with Daniel and help him with his homework. They would talk about their days, though neither mentioned the hard parts unless they had to. She would tell him stories about patients she'd helped at the hospital, about the tiny victories that made her job worthwhile. Today, I helped a little boy who was scared of getting his cast removed, she told him one evening. He was crying and shaking, but I held his hand and talked to him about his favorite superhero, and he calmed down. When it was over, he gave me the biggest hug and said I was his hero. You are a hero, Mom, Daniel said. The best one. Rebecca smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. Sometimes I don't feel like it. Sometimes I feel like I'm failing you. You shouldn't have to go through this because of something I didn't do. You're not failing me, Daniel said firmly. Everyone else is failing us. But we're going to be okay. I promise, and he meant it. Even at 12 years old, even with his world crumbling around him, Daniel believed they would be okay. He had to. Because if he stopped believing that, he didn't know what would happen to either of them. As the months passed, they developed a routine. They became experts at avoiding certain people and places. They learned to hold their heads high even when people whispered. They learned to find joy in small things, in movie nights at home, in walks at the park early in the morning before others arrived, in Sunday morning pancakes made from scratch. But the hurt never fully went away. It was always there, just beneath the surface. Every time someone crossed the street to avoid them, every time a door closed in Rebecca's face, every time Daniel ate lunch alone, the wound opened up again. Daniel spent hours in the library after school, partly to avoid going home to an empty apartment, partly because he needed to escape into other worlds. He discovered computers there, old desktop machines that the librarian let him use. He taught himself to type, to search for information, to understand how technology worked. He became fascinated with security systems, with cameras, with how things could be recorded and proven. The librarian, Mrs. Thompson, was one of the few adults in town who still treated him kindly. She never mentioned the incident, never looked at him with suspicion. She just helped him find books and encouraged his interests. You're a bright kid, she told him once. Don't let this town make you forget that. Those words stayed with Daniel. They became a lifeline during the darkest moments. Years went by, and Daniel grew up carrying the weight of that Saturday afternoon everywhere he went. High school was better than middle school, but only because the building was bigger and it was easier to disappear into the crowd. He kept his head down, focused on his studies, and spoke to as few people as possible. He learned that being invisible was safer than being seen, but inside he never forgot. He never forgot the look on his mother's face that day in the store. He never forgot her tears in the parking lot, and he never forgot the promise he made to himself. Someday he would prove her innocence. Somehow he would make things right. His obsession with technology and security systems grew stronger. What started as curiosity in the library became a passion. He spent hours learning about cameras, about how they worked, about digital storage and video enhancement. His teachers noticed his talent. Mr. Harrison, his computer science teacher, told him he had a gift. "You understand this stuff better than kids twice your age," Mr. Harrison said one day after class. "Have you thought about studying this in college?" College felt like an impossible dream. They barely had enough money for groceries, let alone tuition. But Daniel didn't say that. He just nodded and said, "Maybe." Rebecca worked herself to exhaustion to keep them afloat. She had eventually found a few new cleaning clients, people who had moved to town after the incident and didn't know the story. She still worked at the hospital, still picked up every extra shift she could. Her hair started going gray when she was only 35. Her hands developed arthritis from all the cleaning. She moved slower, looked older than her years, but she never complained. Not once. And she never stopped encouraging Daniel. "You're going to college," she told him when he was a junior in high school. "I don't care what it takes. You're too smart not to." "Mom, we can't afford it," Daniel said gently. "Then you'll get scholarships. You'll get loans. We'll figure it out." She looked at him with fierce determination. "You are not going to let this town and what happened define your entire life. You're going to get out of here and do something amazing. Do you hear me?" So Daniel worked even harder. He applied for every scholarship he could find. He took extra AP classes. He joined the computer club and competed in programming competitions. And somehow, miracle of miracles, he got a full scholarship to the state university. It wasn't a fancy school, but it had a solid computer science program, and it was his ticket out. The day he got the acceptance letter, Rebecca cried, but this time they were tears of joy. She hugged him so tight he could barely breathe. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. So proud. College opened up a new world for Daniel. For the first time since he was 12, people didn't know his story. They didn't look at him with suspicion or pity. He was just another student, and it felt like he could finally breathe. He threw himself into his studies. Computer science, programming, network security, digital forensics. He soaked up everything like a sponge. His professors were impressed by his dedication and his natural talent. By his sophomore year, he was working as a teaching assistant. By his junior year, he had an internship at a tech company that specialized in retail security systems. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was working with the very type of system that had destroyed his mother's reputation, but instead of it making him bitter, it fueled him. He learned everything he could about how these systems worked, how they could malfunction, how footage was stored and retrieved. He graduated with honors and was immediately offered a job at his internship company. The pay was good, better than anything anyone in his family had ever made. His first big purchase was a new car for his mother. Her old one had finally died, and she had been taking the bus to work. When he drove up to her apartment in the brand new sedan, Rebecca came outside and just stared. "Daniel, what did you do?" she asked, her hand over her mouth. "I bought you a car," he said, grinning. "You deserve it, Mom. You deserve so much more than this, but it's a start." She cried again, and he realized his mother had done a lot of crying over the years. He promised himself he would give her reasons to cry happy tears from now on. But Rebecca wouldn't leave their town. Daniel asked her to move multiple times, offered to find her a place near where he worked, but she always said no. "This is my home," she said. "I'm not going to let them chase me away. Besides, the hospital needs me. My patients need me." She had become the senior night nurse by then. Despite everything, she was good at her job, and the hospital recognized that. The patients loved her. She had a gentle way about her, a kindness that made people feel safe and cared for. It was just some of the staff who still held on to old prejudices. Daniel visited her every few weeks. He hated seeing her still living in that small town, still facing the occasional cold shoulder at the grocery store. Patterson's Market was still there, still owned by the same family, though old Mr. Patterson had mostly retired and his son ran it now. Every time Daniel drove past that store, he felt his jaw clench. Every time he saw his mother try to act like the whispers and stares didn't bother her, he felt that old promise burning in his chest. He moved up quickly in his career. His company promoted him to senior security consultant. He worked with major retailers across the country, helping them install and maintain sophisticated security systems. He analyzed footage when there were incidents. He testified as an expert witness in court cases. He became very, very good at his job, but he never forgot where he came from or why he had chosen this path. At night, alone in his apartment, he would sometimes pull up old articles about shoplifting incidents. about false accusations, about the psychology of mob mentality and how quickly communities could turn on someone. He read about wrongful accusations and how they destroyed lives. Each story felt personal. His mother kept telling him to let go of the past, to move on, to build his life without looking back. And he did build his life. He had a good job, a nice apartment, a few close friends he'd made in college. But he couldn't let go. Not completely. The injustice of what happened to his mother had shaped him too fundamentally. When he was 28, he got a call that changed everything. His mother had collapsed at work. She was in the hospital, the same hospital where she worked, and the doctors were running tests. Daniel drove 4 hours straight to get there. It turned out to be exhaustion and dehydration. She had been working double shifts to save money for retirement, not eating properly, not taking care of herself. The doctor told Daniel she needed to slow down, but Rebecca was stubborn. "I'm fine," she insisted from her hospital bed. "I just got dizzy." "It happens." "Mom, you're killing yourself," Daniel said. "You need to rest. You need to take care of yourself for once." "I am taking care of myself. I'm building a life, providing for my future. That's taking care of myself." Looking at her in that hospital bed, Daniel saw how much she had aged. She was only 50, but she looked older. The years of stress, of working too hard, of carrying the burden of false accusations had taken their toll. "I'm going to make enough money that you can retire early," Daniel told her. "I promise. You don't need to take care of me," Rebecca said softly. "You need to live your own life." "You are my life," Daniel said. "You've sacrificed everything for me. Let me do this for you." He went back to work with renewed determination. He took on more projects, worked longer hours, saved every penny he could. Within 2 years, he had enough saved to supplement his mother's income, so she could cut back on shifts. He sent her money every month, though she always protested, and he waited. He didn't know what he was waiting for exactly. Justice? Vindication? A chance to prove what really happened that day? He just knew that the story wasn't over yet. Then, in the spring of 2018, he got a call from an old friend who still lived in his hometown. Patterson's Market was closing. After 60 years in business, the family was finally selling. They were liquidating everything, getting rid of all the old equipment, the fixtures, everything. Daniel's heart started racing. The equipment. The security system. The old footage. He called his boss and told him he needed a week off. Then he drove back to his hometown for the first time in months. He hadn't planned on going back so soon, but this felt important. This felt like the moment he had been waiting for, even though he couldn't explain why. The store looked sad and empty when he arrived. Going out of business signs covered the windows. Inside, everything was marked down, and there were gaps on the shelves where inventory had already sold. And somewhere in this building was the old security system. The system that might still have the footage from that day 20 years ago. The footage that could prove once and for all that his mother had done nothing wrong. Daniel walked through the nearly empty store, memories flooding back with every step. He remembered exactly where they had been standing when the alarm went off. He could still picture his mother's confused face, could still hear Mr. Patterson's accusing voice echoing through the aisles. He found Kyle Patterson, the son who now ran the store, in the back office surrounded by boxes and paperwork. Kyle was about 10 years older than Daniel, and he vaguely remembered him from around town. Kyle looked up when Daniel knocked on the doorframe. "Can I help you?" Kyle asked, looking exhausted. "I heard you're liquidating everything," Daniel said. "I work in retail security consulting. I was wondering if you'd be interested in selling the old security equipment. I collect vintage systems for research and training purposes." It wasn't entirely a lie. Daniel did sometimes use old equipment for training. But that wasn't why he wanted it. Kyle laughed, but it was a tired sound. "You want that old junk? Most of it hasn't been used in years. We upgraded to a digital system about 5 years ago, but we kept all the old equipment in storage. Dad never threw anything away." "I'd be interested in all of it," Daniel said. "The old analog system, any archived footage, storage devices, everything. I'd pay fair market value." Kyle looked at him like he was crazy. "You'd pay for that stuff?" "Man, I was going to have to pay someone to haul it away. If you want it, you can have it for whatever it costs to move it out of here." Daniel's heart was pounding, but he kept his face neutral. "I have a truck. I can handle the moving. Would $200 work?" $200 for a bunch of old security equipment that doesn't even work anymore?" Kyle shook his head in disbelief. Sure, why not? Come on, I'll show you where it is. They went down to the basement storage area. It was dusty and dimly lit, filled with old shelving units, broken shopping carts, and stacks of boxes. In the far corner, covered with a tarp, was the old security system. Monitors, recording devices, boxes of old VHS tapes, and later digital storage drives. Everything from the store's entire 60-year history was there. Daniel's hands shook slightly as he pulled back the tarp. This was it. Somewhere in all of this was the truth about what happened that day in 1998. It's all yours, Kyle said. Good luck with whatever you're planning to do with it. It took Daniel 3 trips to load everything into his truck. Kyle helped him carry some of the heavier pieces. As they worked, Kyle talked about how sad he was to close the store, how his father was getting older and couldn't handle the stress anymore, how big chain stores had made it impossible for them to compete. Daniel wanted to hate Kyle, wanted to hate the whole Patterson family. But looking at this tired man trying to close a chapter of his family's history, he found he couldn't. Kyle had nothing to do with what his father had done. He was just trying to survive just like everyone else. I'm sorry you have to close, Daniel said, and he meant it. I know it's been part of this town for a long time. Yeah, well, Kyle said. Times change. People change. Dad made some mistakes over the years. Lost some good customers because of it. You can't run a business when people don't trust you. Daniel wondered if Kyle knew about what happened with his mother. He didn't ask. He just thanked him, paid him the $200, and drove away with his truck full of old security equipment. He didn't take it back to his apartment. Instead, he rented a small storage unit and spent the next week sorting through everything. He took time off work, telling his boss he had a personal project. His boss was understanding. Daniel had never taken much time off before. The organization of the archived footage was chaotic at best. VHS tapes from the early years were labeled with just dates, some smudged or faded. The digital storage from later years was better organized, but the system they had used was ancient and difficult to work with. Daniel set up a workstation in the storage unit with a power strip, his laptop and equipment he had brought from home. He worked methodically day after day searching through footage. He knew the date he was looking for, June 13, 1998. He had that date memorized the way some people remember birthdays or anniversaries. It took him 4 days to find the right storage box. His heart nearly stopped when he saw the label, June 1998. The box was full of VHS tapes, one for each day of the month. He pulled out the tape labeled June 13th with trembling hands, but when he tried to play it, nothing happened. The tape was damaged, degraded after 20 years in storage. The footage was unwatchable, just static and distorted images. Daniel wanted to scream. He had been so close, but he refused to give up. He took the tape to a professional restoration service, a place he had worked with before on other projects. They specialized in recovering data from damaged media. This is pretty deteriorated, the technician told him, but there's a chance we can recover something. It'll take time and it won't be cheap. I don't care what it costs, Daniel said. This is important. 2 weeks later, he got the call. They had managed to recover most of the footage. It was grainy and had some gaps, but it was viewable. Daniel picked it up immediately and took it back to his storage unit. He sat in front of his laptop, the recovered footage loaded and ready to play. His finger hovered over the play button. 20 years had led to this moment. 20 years of his mother being treated like a criminal, of living under a cloud of suspicion, of carrying shame for something she didn't do. He pressed play. The footage was black and white and grainy, but it was clear enough. He watched people moving through the store, shopping, going about their normal day. Then he saw them. His mother and his 12-year-old self walking through the aisles. Seeing his younger self on that screen was surreal. He looked so small, so young. He watched his mother compare prices, put items in the cart. He watched them walk toward the front of the store. He watched her pick up the aspirin, and then he saw what happened next. Just before his mother reached for the aspirin, another shopper walked past her heading toward the exit. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but Daniel could see something attached to the back of the other shopper's jacket. A security tag. The shopper walked through the sensors at the exit, and that's when the alarm went off. His mother turned at the sound, confusion on her face. But the other shopper, the one who had actually triggered the alarm, just kept walking. They didn't stop. They didn't realize the tag was on their jacket. Daniel replayed it over and over, his hands shaking. There it was, clear as day. His mother hadn't been anywhere near the exit. She hadn't triggered the alarm. It was another customer, and they had walked out before anyone realized what had happened. But that wasn't all. Daniel kept watching. He watched Mr. Patterson storm over to his mother. He watched the confrontation. And then he saw something else. After his mother and his younger self had left, after they had been humiliated and kicked out, he saw Mr. Patterson walk to the back of the store. He disappeared into his office. He never checked the cameras. He never reviewed the footage. Daniel felt a mixture of emotions wash over him: relief, vindication, anger, grief for all the years his mother had suffered unnecessarily. All of this could have been avoided if Mr. Patterson had just taken 5 minutes to check the footage before accusing her. He spent the next several days going through more footage from that week. He found maintenance logs stored with the equipment. The security system had been malfunctioning all week. There were at least a dozen false alarms in the days leading up to the incident with his mother. Mr. Patterson had known the system wasn't working properly, but he had still jumped to conclusions. Daniel made copies of everything. He enhanced the footage using modern technology, making it as clear as possible. He compiled the maintenance logs. He put together a complete timeline of what had happened that day and in the days leading up to it. Then he sat in that storage unit, staring at the evidence in front of him, and tried to figure out what to do next. He could go to Mr. Patterson directly, confront him with the evidence, but the man was old now, probably in his 70s. What would that accomplish? He could sue the store, but it was already closing. The Patterson family would lose everything they had left, or he could take it to the media. He could make sure everyone who had shunned his mother, everyone who had whispered about her, everyone who had treated her like a criminal for 20 years, knew the truth. That night, Daniel drove to his mother's apartment. She was surprised to see him. It was a Wednesday, and he usually only visited on weekends. "Daniel, is everything okay?" she asked, worry in her eyes. He sat down at her kitchen table, the same table where they had eaten countless meals together over the years. "Mom, I need to show you something." He pulled out his laptop and played the recovered footage for her. He watched her face as she saw what really happened that day. Saw the other customer walk out with the tag on their jacket. Saw the proof that she had been innocent all along. Rebecca's hand came up to cover her mouth. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, Daniel." "I have all the evidence," Daniel said. "The footage, the maintenance log showing the system was broken, everything. I can prove what really happened. I can make them all see the truth." But instead of looking happy, his mother looked scared. "What are you going to do?" Daniel looked at his mother's frightened face and felt his determination waver. "What do you mean?" "I'm going to show everyone the truth. I'm going to prove you didn't do anything wrong." Rebecca closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. "And then what happens? The Pattersons lose their store? The town gets torn apart? More hurt, more anger, more pain. Mom, they deserve to know what they did to you. What they put us through." Daniel could feel his voice rising. "You lost clients. You lost friends. I got bullied for years. We were treated like criminals. Don't you want them to know they were wrong?" "Of course I do," Rebecca said quietly. "But I also know that revenge doesn't heal anything. It just creates more wounds." They sat in silence for a long moment. Daniel felt like that 12-year-old boy again, frustrated and helpless. "So what am I supposed to do? Just let it go? Pretend it never happened?" "No," his mother said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "I'm not saying that. I'm saying we need to think about what we really want from this. Do we want to hurt people back? Or do we want the truth to come out in a way that might actually change things?" Daniel spent the next few days thinking about what she said. He went back to work but couldn't concentrate. His mind kept returning to that footage, to those 20 years of injustice. He had the power now to set things right. But what was the right way to do it? Then one morning he had an idea. He called the local newspaper, the one that served his hometown and the surrounding county. He asked to speak to a reporter about a story that had happened 20 years ago and had just been solved. The reporter's name was Lisa Chen. She was in her 30s, relatively new to the paper, and she was interested. She agreed to meet with him that weekend. They met at a coffee shop in a town between where Daniel lived and his hometown. He brought his laptop, the footage, and all the documentation he had compiled. Lisa watched the footage 3 times, taking notes the whole time. "This is incredible," she said. "And you said this happened 20 years ago? Your mother has been living with this accusation for 20 years? "Yes," Daniel said. "And I want to tell the story, but I want to do it right. I don't want it to be about revenge. I want it to be about what happens when we rush to judgment, about how false accusations destroy lives, about the importance of checking facts before condemning someone." Lisa nodded slowly. "I think I can write that story. But I'll need to interview your mother. And I should probably reach out to Mr. Patterson for comment." Daniel hesitated. "Mr. Patterson is old now. His son is closing the store. I don't want to destroy them." "That's not your decision to make," Lisa said gently. "The truth is the truth. People have a right to know what happened. What they do with that information is up to them." It took 2 weeks to put the story together. Lisa interviewed Rebecca, who told her side of the story with quiet dignity. She talked about what it had been like to be accused in front of the whole town, about losing her cleaning clients, about watching her son get bullied. But she also talked about forgiveness, about how she had refused to become bitter, about the patients she had helped at the hospital who had made her life meaningful despite everything. Lisa also interviewed Daniel, who talked about growing up under the shadow of his mother's false accusation, about how it had shaped his life and career. He showed her the promise he had written to himself in a journal when he was 12, the promise to prove his mother's innocence someday. And Lisa went to speak with Mr. Patterson. The old man lived in a nursing home now. When Lisa showed him the footage, he broke down crying. He said he had thought about that day many times over the years, had sometimes wondered if he had been too harsh, but he never imagined he had been completely wrong. "I was so sure," he told Lisa, his voice shaking. "The alarm went off and she was right there and I just assumed. I never checked the cameras. I never gave her a chance to prove her innocence. I destroyed that woman's reputation because I was too proud and too stubborn to admit. I might be wrong." The story ran on the front page of the newspaper on a Sunday morning in August 2018. The headline read, "20 years later, the truth emerges. Local nurse falsely accused of shoplifting." The article included screenshots from the enhanced footage, quotes from Rebecca and Daniel, and Mr. Patterson's apology. It was thorough, well-written, and fair. Lisa had done exactly what Daniel had hoped for. She told the story not as an attack, but as a lesson. The response was immediate and overwhelming. By Monday morning, the story had been shared thousands of times on social media. Local news stations picked it up. By Tuesday, it had gone regional. By Wednesday, national news outlets were running stories about the small-town nurse who had been vindicated after 20 years. Daniel's phone didn't stop ringing. His mother's phone didn't stop ringing. People from their town were calling, emailing, messaging them on social media. Some were apologizing. Some were making excuses. Some were angry at themselves for having believed the worst. Mrs. Chen, who used to whisper about Rebecca, posted a public apology on Facebook. Tommy Richardson's father wrote a letter to the editor of the newspaper, admitting he had been wrong to judge Rebecca. Jenny Martinez, now 32 years old and a teacher herself, sent Rebecca a long email apologizing for asking to change seats all those years ago. But the most significant response came from the town itself. The mayor called an emergency town council meeting. They discussed what had happened and what it said about their community, and they decided to do something about it.